It was 11:23 a.m. in eastern Ukraine when everything looked calm on Highway M3, a clear sky, dry asphalt, nothing unusual. And yet, at that exact moment, 23 Russian military vehicles were rushing toward Avdiivka carrying ammunition and reinforcements that would decide the next week of combat. The convoy commander felt completely safe. Two air defense systems were watching the sky, weather was perfect, and cover was only 35 minutes away. He had no idea Ukrainian reconnaissance had already been tracking them for 2 hours straight. 45 kilometers away, a Ukrainian Su-25 pilot stepped into his cockpit. The briefing he received was brutally short. A long convoy on open road, to panzer systems guarding it, and a tiny window of time before they disappeared behind cover. His job sounded simple: destroy them before they reach safety, but every pilot understood what it meant. Attacking moving targets protected by modern Russian air defenses in broad daylight was considered suicide. But he had done 89 combat missions already, survived hits, and flown home with shrapnel in the fuselage. The aircraft was old, heavy, and built like a flying tank, but this time, the danger was different. There would be no surprise, no backup, just one jet against a column protected by systems designed exactly to kill aircraft like his. He pushed the throttle forward and lifted off, immediately dropping to barely 150 meters altitude, hugging the terrain to stay hidden from Russian radars. At that height there was no safety margin. One wrong move, one misjudged angle, and had hit the ground at nearly 700 kilometers per hour. Ukrainian ground controllers fed him encrypted updates. The convoy was exposed on open highway, the air defenses were active and scanning, and the weather was perfect for both sides. The window was closing fast. 8 kilometers from the convoy, he pulled the aircraft upward in a sudden climb, rising from 150 meters to 1,000 in seconds. That single move lit up every Russian radar screen in the area. He knew he had maybe 10 seconds before the panzers locked onto him. Through his targeting optics he saw the convoy clearly: a long, stretched line of vehicles and two panzers at the front and rear, their radar dishes turning like mechanical predators waiting for prey. His targeting computer showed a solid lock on the first panzer at 11 kilometers. He fired a laser-guided missile and didn't wait to see the result. He locked onto the second and fired again. 18 seconds until impact. 18 seconds of pure chaos. Both panzers detected the launches almost immediately. The first one responded by firing intercept missiles and sending a storm of cannon fire into the sky, trying to build a wall of steel between itself and the incoming threat. But the Su-25 pilot was already dumping chaff strips of reflective material, creating false radar targets much larger than him. The panzer's interceptors followed the decoys and detonated harmlessly. At the same moment, the Ukrainian missile stayed locked on its invisible laser path and slammed into the radar module with 90 kilograms of explosives. The radar dish shattered instantly, turning the entire system into dead metal. The second panzer had a few extra seconds to react. Its crew fired more missiles, more cannon bursts. One round struck the incoming Ukrainian missile stabilizer fin, making it wobble, but laser guidance corrected the trajectory. The missile punched into the vehicle's chassis and blew through its electronics. It didn't explode spectacularly, it simply shut down, useless, smoking, and blind. Two air defense systems neutralized in 20 seconds. The convoy was now completely exposed. The pilot climbed to about 1,800 meters to line up his rocket attack. On the ground, Russian officers were yelling into radios, trying to call for help, but the nearest air defense unit was far beyond engagement range. The Su-25's rocket pods were armed. 80 unguided rockets, each capable of tearing a truck apart or killing an entire squad. At 8 kilometers distance he fired the first 20 rockets, then the next, until all 80 were streaking downward across the length of the convoy like falling spears. A fuel truck was the first to go, erupting into an instant fireball that swallowed nearby vehicles. Seconds later, a truck stacked with ammunition took a direct hit, creating an explosion so huge that windows shattered in a village 5 kilometers away. Armored vehicles flipped from near-miss shockwaves. Transport trucks were shredded. Command vehicles melted under the heat of secondary blasts. The highway turned into a burning, smoking corridor of destruction. Russian soldiers abandoned their vehicles, diving into ditches, but the rockets were still falling. Some vehicles were blown apart, others burned uncontrollably, and others sat damaged, blocking the entire road with debris and cratered asphalt. The pilot didn't stay to admire the results. He was already diving back down to low altitude, releasing more countermeasures, because now every Russian radar within 30 kilometers had a bead on him. Warning tones screamed in his headset, multiple radar locks, missile launches confirmed. A Tor missile system positioned 22 kilometers away fired two missiles at Mach 8. The pilot dropped from 1,800 meters to 100 in a matter of seconds. G-forces crushed him into the seat, but he kept control. At that height he flew just above tree lines and terrain folds, hoping to break radar contact. But the Tor crew had placed their system on higher ground, giving them a clear line of sight. The missiles closed in, 14 seconds to impact. The pilot reacted instinctively. Chaff, flares, jamming everything at once. His electronic pod created ghost signals. Flares burned hotter than his engines. One missile fell for a flare and detonated. The second lost lock in the chaff cloud but kept flying on its predicted path, passing 100 meters behind him before exploding. The blast sent shrapnel slicing into the tail of the aircraft. Warning lights flashed, hydraulics dropping, control surfaces damaged, but the jet stayed in the air. He pushed lower, weaving between terrain folds, staying under 150 meters until he was safely back within Ukrainian airspace. 15 minutes after the attack began, he was out of danger. He radioed his damage report. Countermeasures low, aircraft hit, confirmed destruction of both air defense systems, multiple vehicles eliminated. Enough fuel remained to return to base. Above the ruined convoy, Ukrainian drones recorded the aftermath. Out of 23 vehicles, 9 were destroyed and burning, 8 were damaged and immobilized, 6 were abandoned behind wreckage they could not bypass. The fuel truck burned for 3 hours. The ammunition blast left a crater large enough to swallow a small car. The highway was blocked completely. Russian recovery teams managed to save only 4 damaged vehicles before retreating under threat of Ukrainian artillery. The convoy that was supposed to resupply Avdiivka never made it. Russian units along that sector fought without ammunition and reinforcements for days. Some withdrew, some surrendered. The entire defensive line weakened, and the Su-25 that destroyed them landed with 17 shrapnel holes in its tail and damaged hydraulics. Ground crews patched it up, and it was flying again in 2 days. The pilot took off for his next mission 48 hours later. This is what modern war looks like when your country is fighting for survival. Ukrainian Su-25 jets are old Soviet aircraft with no stealth, limited countermeasures, and lower technology than the systems they face. On paper, they shouldn't survive. Yet they do, because their pilots have learned every weakness in Russian air defenses, every blind angle, every reaction delay. They fly missions NATO considers impossible. 100-meter altitude approaches, pop-up strikes from behind terrain, dive straight through missile zones, and they come back. Not because their equipment is better, it isn't. Not because they have technological superiority. They don't. They survive because they have no choice. Because their homes, families, and cities depend on it. Because when everything you love is on the line, impossible becomes just another mission briefing. This convoy strike showed Russian commanders something they still struggle to accept. Superior technology does not guarantee victory. Adaptation does. Skill does. Courage does. A single jet, 1 pilot, and 60 seconds over the target shut down an entire supply route and shifted the balance of fighting. And somewhere over eastern Ukraine right now, another Su-25 is flying another mission with odds just as bad. The pilot knows the danger, knows Russian defenses improve every week, and takes off anyway. That's what it means to fight for survival. Safety becomes irrelevant. Fear becomes routine. And aircraft that should not still be flying keep flying. The convoy believed it was safe in broad daylight, under full protection. It was wrong.